Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on empowering agriculture through tribal sovereignty. We are grateful for your time, and we're grateful that you're here joining us today. We want to say thank you from our whole team. I think most of us are joining from Fayetteville, Arkansas, the ancestral lands of the Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw tribes. So we appreciate you being here with us. My name is Whitney Sawney. I'm the Communications Manager for the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. Before we get started with the webinar, I do want to walk through some housekeeping with all of you. First of all, as we go throughout the presentation, we do encourage questions. Please submit your questions through the questions dialog box using your GoToWebinar control panel. Our team will do our best to respond to those as quickly as possible. We will also have time towards the end of the webinar dedicated to questions and answers. However, if we are not able to get to them right away or by the end of the webinar, we will be sure to follow up with you directly. Also, for all webinar registrants, we will be including a link to the webinar recording, as well as our PowerPoint presentation for your reference at a later time. So with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over to our director, Erin Parker.
Thank you so much, Whitney, and thanks to everybody for joining us here this afternoon. We are really excited to launch the EATS Academy of Materials with you today. If you were able to join us in December at the Intertribal Agriculture Council's virtual meeting, you saw a little bit of a preview of what we're going to share with you today, but we have the full thing ready to launch now, and we are really excited to have you here and share these resources with you that we've developed for Indian country. I am going to tell you a little bit about not only the EATS Academy and just a really brief overview first of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, the work that we do, our work in Indian country, a little bit of how we got started, or just in case you joined us and you're a little unfamiliar with our work, we want to give you a good solid grounding in the work that we do. I'm also going to give you a little bit of an overview of the EATS Academy itself and a preview of some of the materials that my colleagues Carly and Josiah are going to walk through with you today. And then Whitney's going to turn it over, or I'm going to turn it over to Whitney right after, so she can actually walk you through the website that she and our colleague Nikki have designed. I think it's really fantastic. I'm really excited for you to see it. So I'm going to go through my my presentation sort of quickly so we can get on to the good stuff, and you can see all the materials that we've designed. But a little bit about IFAI first. We were established at the University of Arkansas School of Law back in 2013 by our founding director, Jamie Sintep, who's a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and then Dean of the Law School, future Vice Chancellor of Economic Development for the university, Stacy Leeds, who is a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation. They came together here in 2013 at the University of Arkansas School of Law to create the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. And we're really a one-of-a-kind initiative. We are the only entity in the country that focuses on legal research and policy analysis in the space of food and agriculture for Indian country and for tribal governments. We do everything that we do looking at it through the lens of how we can support tribal sovereignty and how we can support tribal governments and individual native farmers and ranchers, fishermen, and food people as they enact policies and create programs and farm and ranch to create transformative food systems in Indian country and support food sovereignty through agriculture and economic development. So that's a little bit about what we do. We have a lot of different projects and programs as part of that. As you can imagine, food systems work is really broad. So the slide here that you can see just shows a little bit of a snapshot of our work. Believe it or not, it doesn't all fit on one slide, but we're going to hit on a lot of the things I think that we're talking about here today that are on this slide. So we wanted to share a little bit about our work with you, just in case, in addition to the EATS materials that we're sharing today, some of these other areas might be of interest to you as you're working in food sovereignty. We have created a model tribal food and agriculture code. That's one of the biggest things that we've done recently in terms of time and page length. It's about 1,000 pages of legal code designed for tribal nations who want to express their sovereignty in the space of food and agriculture. It's really a comprehensive set of model laws in food and agriculture, kind of a farm to fork of food and ag law, and that is a free resource for any tribe that wants to review, adopt, or implement any kind of resource on that. And we are able to be technical assistance for that process as well. We're happy to work with tribal attorneys, your in-house counsel, to develop and customize any aspects of those model laws that we have in that food code. And that could be part of the work that you might be working on using the Eats Academy materials, because part of those are very tribal government focused. I wanted to be sure that I mentioned that today. That's another resource that we have in addition to the Eats materials we're going to be talking about today. We're also the research partner to the Native Farm Bill Coalition, the largest ever coordinated effort in Indian country food systems. A group of over 170 member tribal nations came together in 2017 to look at opportunities to increase Indian countries' access to federal programming and federal dollars that support food and agriculture systems in Indian country, looking primarily, of course, at the Federal Farm Bill, which is the largest piece of federal legislation that sets food and agriculture policy for our whole country. And so that was, we're the research partner to the coalition. We put out a lot of educational materials around that. Some of the other things that you may see in the Eats Academy and materials have some overlap with some of the 63 tribal specific provisions that actually came out of that 2018 Farm Bill. A lot of those things were priority items that were identified by the members of the Native Farm Bill Coalition, things like better market access dollars for Indian countries, for specialty crop programming, like through LAMP, things like the 638 food sourcing opportunity through the food distribution program on Indian reservations that for the first time acknowledges tribal sovereignty by enabling tribes to source directly food for the food packages in that program. We know that those and many of the other opportunities in that Farm Bill are things that tribal nations are looking at right now as levers to enact long-term food systems change in their tribal jurisdictions and promote food sovereignty for their people and their lands. So we wanted to be sure that I mentioned that work as well. We also have a Tribal Food Safety Alliance. You know, we get a lot of discussion as people are building out food systems about what food safety practices look like in light of some of the new federal laws that have come down in the last 10 years or so, including the Food Safety Modernization Act. And we are part of the Tribal Food Safety Alliance with our partners at the Intertribal Agriculture Council, as well as the federally recognized tribal extension program at the University of Arizona. So all of those pieces, I mention all those pieces just to set us up for an EATS discussion, because I do think that a lot of those things have a lot of correlation with what we're going to share with you EATS today. So those are some of the other resources we have. I won't spend time looking over every single thing on the slide. I just wanted to hit a couple of the things that I feel like really overlap, just in case you were really interested in our EATS materials and wanted to kind of talk to our team about some broader food systems work and strategic planning, which is definitely one of the free resources that we offer here to tribal nations at the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. So with that, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of our EATS Academy. Just a brief one before I turn it back over to Whitney so you can actually see the EATS Academy. I would be remiss if I didn't begin our discussion of our EATS Academy without thanking the Walmart Foundation. We received a generous grant from the Walmart Foundation to develop these educational materials for tribal governments and producers that you're going to see before you today. These are really all designed to do exactly what it says on your screen, to strengthen tribal food systems, empower tribal economies, and improve tribal health outcomes. We had a whole plan that we were going to launch last year, and as with many other plans, last year COVID required us to shift pretty quickly to an alternate delivery format. So our original goal was to be with you in person, to walk through these materials and share workbooks and sit down one-on-one and do strategic planning. We can still do that, we just have to do it virtually. So we're launching a little bit of a different way, but we're so appreciative of all of you hanging out on Zoom with us this afternoon. I know the Zoom fatigue is real, but, or the GoToWebinar fatigue, I guess, in this particular case, but I really, really appreciate you being here. We're excited to share these with you, even in this alternate format that we have. A little bit about the EATS Academy. I'll give you just a couple of preview slides before I turn it over to Whitney. This is a lot of digital resources, obviously, since we are in a much more digital environment now, having pivoted to accommodate that health and safety during the pandemic. Everything that we have here that we're going to share with you today, as well as a lot of other resources, are available on our website at indigenousfoodandag.com. This whole ecosystem of resources, whether it's the tribal government facing resources or the resources that we've developed for individual native farmers and ranchers, all of these things are in a living online platform of resources that you can find easily by accessing our website. They're downloadable as PDF documents so that you can access them easily, even with limited internet capacity. We're not done with this, by the way. This is launch day, but we're not finished. We're going to be continuing to add additional materials for anybody who's interested in additional materials, please reach out to our team. Our contact information will be on the end of this. At the end of this presentation, you can also put some questions and notes in the chat as well. We'd love to have your feedback as you participate in these materials, because we want to be the best resources that we can be for you. So if there's something that you're missing, or you think that you would need to enhance some of the work that we've already done here, we would love to hear from you and know a little bit more about that. So I'll show you a little bit of what the resources actually look like as well. We've developed kind of two different tracks of materials here. So there's some resources that support that are like tribal government focused materials, resources that are really designed for tribal elected officials, employees of tribal departments, to be able to enact policies or procedures and that will enhance food sovereignty within the tribal community. So we've got some case studies, for example, of tribes that have departments or divisions of agriculture, and how tribes are using those kinds of legal entities to enact change in food systems within their jurisdictions. So just kind of give you some comparisons. We've got some mind maps and guides to decision making, resource worksheets, and sample organization charts that we'll share with you a little bit later today. But so that's kind of track one, is the tribal government focused materials, and then the second half, track two, would be more of an individual producer focused materials. And so we have different kinds of materials that support tribal producers who are looking to engage as well with different programs that have come out. Like I mentioned, those farm bill programs, people are interested in engaging more with those. Those are some other materials that we have as well. And those materials would show, for example, the benefits of a tribal department of agriculture for native producers, for beginning farmers and ranchers, for value added operators, any kind of business organization opportunities. So it's kind of a two-track focus, because we know that it takes, not only the tribal government acting in this space, but also we wanted to make sure that we were developing resources for individuals as well who are seeking to access those resources that are developed either by tribal governments or by the federal government through programs like the Farm Bill. So we wanted to make sure that all of those things were kind of represented here in our EATS Academy materials. And I think with that, you probably just want to see the materials. So I'm going to turn it over to Whitney. Before I do that, I do want to give just one quick, very big thank you again to everybody on our team. Whitney Sawney and Nikki Young have done an absolutely fantastic job of developing all of the materials, everything that you see here, that amazing page, like opening page and infographics. All of the materials that you've seen here are like their brainchildren, and they've done a really fantastic job. And our associate director, Carly Griffith-Hotbett, has also done a fantastic job of shepherding this whole project from start to finish. We wouldn't have been able to launch any of this without the two of them, and without Josiah Griffin on our team as well, helping to develop resources and materials, and of course the Walmart Foundation, and all of you who wouldn't be here if it weren't for everybody who is listening to me talk right now. So I'm going to hand it back over to Whitney, but thank you to our team. We're excited to launch this with you, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions at the end as well. So thanks everybody. Whitney, I'll give it back over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. I appreciate all of you joining us, and as Erin mentioned, this EATS Academy webpage is housed on our website at indigenousfoodandag.com. So with that, I will go ahead and switch over to that. When you go to indigenousfoodandag.com on our homepage, you will see at the very top, you'll see a tab here at the very top that says EATS Academy. So it's the best way to access that. It'll bring you right to the EATS Academy webpage. So I'm going to go do a quick walkthrough of all the resources. We have all of this new content and resources available to you, so we really want to make sure you know how to access them. We wanted to develop an online platform available to all tribal stakeholders, whether you are a new beginning and farmer rancher, a native youth agriculture leader, a tribal leader, or a tribal program staff or subject matter expert. So we have tried to make a one-stop shop for all of our EATS Academy resources. I know that there are some limitations with internet sometimes in more rural areas, so we wanted to be sure to have the ability to download the resources as PDFs, and you can print them off, you can create your own binder. And the purpose of these is to mark up these pages, and some of these are guided worksheets, for example, so you can make your own lists and add your own information to really customize it to fit and your goals for tribal food sovereignty efforts. And the best way to think about this web page and navigating through it all is to think of it as a choose your own adventure sort of navigation. So we have tried our best to sort the materials and make recommendations for where to get started based off your interests, goals, or expertise areas. So I'm going to start off first with a review of the layout and functionality. And as I mentioned, the landscape of food and agriculture programs and policies, they change, right? We need to adapt to new information as it becomes available. And so this online resource is intended to serve as your source of information as it evolves and as more needs from tribal governments and producers are identified. So that's what's really important for you to stay in touch with us and communicate, provide your feedback. We would really love to hear your thoughts. This is, like I said, a foundational platform that will continue to grow. And with that being said, the best way to keep up with those changes, we encourage you to sign up for our EATS Academy email listserv. And I know, especially now in a digital world where we are being inundated with emails, the purpose of this is not to add more to your inbox. Really, the purpose is to remain informed as new information is added or updated. And you're going to see here shortly that we even have about 4 more resources that are not on here just yet, but we'll be releasing very soon. So I encourage you to sign up. You have an option to subscribe to our listserv here right at the top. And all you have to do is put in your first name, last name, email address, and you can subscribe automatically. And then the emails, whenever we send them out, will go directly to your inbox. So kind of scrolling through, as I mentioned, kind of a list of our audiences that the resources serve. So Native youth ag leaders, beginning farmers and ranchers, individual producers and agriculture entrepreneurs, tribal agriculture, nutrition, or natural resources program staff, or subject matter experts and tribal leaders. So how do we get started? So what we'll do is kind of think about this. You want to identify which category best fits your role, your interests, goals, or areas of expertise. So for example, if you are a Native youth agriculture leader, you can just select this. We have created these initial questions. This is not a complete comprehensive list of questions that cover all of the resources, but we just wanted to have a good starting point for you to kind of navigate. Maybe you're interested, for example, as Aaron had mentioned, there are 63 tribal specific provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill. So maybe you're interested in the programs that are specifically applicable for Native youth interested in agriculture. So you would select and click on this link. I have it pulled up here. Here's an example of what that resource looks like, and it just goes through those Native youth programs in the 2018 Farm Bill, lays it out by title, and you can just download this PDF for your use at a later date. Or let's say, for example, you are a beginning farmer and rancher, and you're interested in organizing your business, and do you need an LLC, for example? We have this really great resource that was put together by Josiah Griffin, which is a business structure decision tree, and it goes through the different types of business structures as well. If you are a tribal leader or an individual producer, maybe you're interested in scaling up your ag operation. So here are some of the questions that you can use as a good starting point. If you're interested in scaling up your ag operation, we have this really great resource, this guided worksheet, so I'll go through that. It's a resource banking for informed goal setting, and I definitely encourage you to look and check that out when you get a chance. Or maybe you're a tribal leader who's interested in learning from other tribal departments of agriculture. We do have resources, for example, of success stories from other departments. We are really grateful to the Muskogee Creek Nation as well as the Menominee Indian tribe for sharing their successes and developing their departments of agriculture. So this is really just used as a starting point for you. But as I mentioned, it's not a comprehensive list. We do have all of our resources then separated for downloadable PDFs as a resource bank below this section. Under each title of the resource, you will see our recommended targeted audience. So for example, the Native Youth programs, we have here people who might be interested, obviously Native youth leaders, but also maybe you're a program staff member who is interested in supporting Native youth programs or developing support systems for the Native youth in your community. So tribal leaders may be of interest. We do have other examples here I will show you. You kind of just can scroll through. I encourage you to take the time to go through each resource. We have some decision trees. We have different infographics, like Native youth opportunities for internships. We have mind maps. We also have webinars. So sometimes there are more in-depth subject matter areas where our team has taken the time to develop a webinar. You also can download the corresponding PowerPoint that goes along with that. So this goes to the YouTube channel for the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, and you can watch those there. So there are a variety of different resources if you get a chance to take the time to look through them. Just another reminder, we do have new resources coming soon. So here's just a quick sneak peek of some of those content, some of the content that we're going to be releasing soon. And so please, if you get a chance, go ahead and subscribe to our email listserv. That's the best way for us to stay in touch with you. And then below we have some frequently asked questions. One point I wanted to point out the most is if you do not see an answer to your question, how do you get in touch with our team? So our contact information is available to you here with our email addresses. So I think that kind of gives a quick overview of the actual webpage itself. And with that, I think we can go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint, and I can turn it over to Josiah to do a quick resource highlight.
And thank you, Whitney. So aloha kaku. My name is Josiah Griffin. I am Native Hawaiian Samoan, and I'm a program and policy specialist with the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. As Whitney and Aaron were relaying to you throughout our discussions over this webinar, our goal is to provide resources and informational materials that are useful and timely for what you are dealing with today. And also the different realities that you might be facing, both as you're working through economic circumstances, or even just starting to look at navigating federal requirements and regulations that might otherwise roll over into commercial market standards. And so as we are kind of building out and laying the foundation for these materials, one thing that we continue to be cognizant of is the fact that we as Native people commonly have our foot in multiple worlds and multiple realities, working through different cultural considerations, first and foremost, paying homage and respect to the traditions and the environments in which our communities have thrived for so many years. But as we also navigate our current landscape and environment, we, like those who have come before us, also have to be mindful of how things have shifted. And so as we kind of build out, and as the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative supports Indian country food systems and building out agricultural foodways, we have to first kind of take a look at where it's helpful in many cases to first take a look at some of the foundational resources that might help to lay that groundwork for future success, including the development of business structures. So as we build into and look at the variety of resources that are available through the EATS Academy, one of the types of resources that we've provided, as Whitney has highlighted, are choose your own adventure style informational materials like decision trees, which are exampled here. So as we're looking at business structures, we know first and foremost that agricultural enterprises are managed by any number of individuals, organizations, and tribal governments throughout Indian country writ large. And so as we kind of navigate through this space, the first step that we consider is whether or not the enterprise is managed or will be managed by a tribal entity like a tribal government or by an individual tribal citizen. And from there, break that chart into any number of different business structure opportunities that are available to you as you are building out a business or an agricultural enterprise that makes sense to your interest areas, makes sense to your community of service, and also makes sense to the market that you're looking to serve. One of the other things that we are very cognizant of as we kind of look at the business and enterprise structure discussions is that, especially when we're talking to individual tribal citizens that are setting up their own growing operations, not setting up a business structure formally is still setting up a business structure, and that you would then be either operating typically as a sole proprietor or as a partner if you are working in conjunction with other people. And so we want to make sure that people are aware of the realities that they face in these new environments and able to navigate these areas based on not only what those components mean for how you structure activities and move forward, but also as they relate to different like operational considerations like tax liability. So as we move into other resource opportunities that are provided through the EATS Academy, such as looking at webinars on food safety, if we move over to the next slide. As Whitney and Aaron have mentioned as well, our goal is to ensure that these resources that we provide for you are timely, relevant, and meaningful to what you're looking to do now. And that includes taking a look at the landscape of federal regulations and even market standards, market considerations that are being enacted around you that might play a role in how you manage or navigate your food economies where you're operating. And so as we look at this, these different realities and these different environments, on September of 2020, FDA rolled out a proposed rule on the traceability of foods across the food supply chain based on a risk ranking model of foods that have, based on their standards and their kind of formulas, caused or have been known to cause greater outbreaks of foodborne illnesses. So based on that information, they've developed a food traceability list of different foods that, if you are based on kind of what they're looking at, if you are growing, so if you are working in agricultural production on farm or working with fresh fruits and vegetables, if you are creating or transforming, so if you are working in the space of food manufacturing or food processing, or if you are shipping, like distributing foods from one area to another, or receiving these foods from any of the other entities that I previously referenced as part of kind of this proposed rule rollout. There are a number of key data elements that FDA is proposing and that your operation maintain, as well as pass on to those individuals or those organizations that will be shipping or receiving your food down that food supply chain line. And so as FDA moves into a final version of the rule, and we will certainly keep this webinar updated, as well as any of the other materials that we host as part of the EATS Academy, to ensure that they will continue to remain timely and relevant for what you're doing. And with that, I think I can turn it over to Carly Hotvet, our Associate Director.
Great. Thanks so much, Josiah, for giving that great overview. As Josiah said, there are a lot of additional resources that are going to be developed, and I'm happy to join you today and share this information. Just briefly, my name is Carly Hotvet. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and I am the Associate Director here at the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. So some of the resources that we were able to develop have really focused on, different user groups. And today I want to talk about this particular resource is intended to support your subject matter expert and employees, and also your tribal leadership that is interested in how to structure a Department of Agriculture, if that's something that they're interested in creating. So this mind map that you see here in front of you, and I know some of the print's a little bit small, but we do have this resource on our website, which is available for you to view, so you can zoom in and kind of see some of the finer print there. But it's intended to really answer some of the questions that are common when considering what it means to structure a Department of Ag. And those considerations include staffing, how to receive communication and feedback from the community population that your Department of Ag is intended to serve, what kind of goal setting and analysis considerations need to be taken into account, and then how to format the organization and structure. So as you walk through some of these particular questions and the branches of the chart, that'll help you answer some of the questions and give you some direction as far as what your Department of Agriculture needs to look like, and give you some information and provoke some thought into really getting in the driver's seat to determine the food sovereignty priorities for your tribal organization. And, you know, some of those may look like, you know, what kind of staffing do we need to have? Do we need to hire somebody who is professionalized in a certain area? Do we have people on staff that we can just get trained up? How do we get feedback from our community? Should we circulate a survey? Should we have a town hall? Should we collaborate with our elected officials as representatives of the community? What kind of voice should be included from that perspective? What's our focus? Do we want to provide a service? Do we want to have an enterprise that's revenue driven? What's our goal for that? Have a better opportunity to view that particular resource.
Hello, Carly. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I think unfortunately maybe we're having some audio issues. Carly, are you still there?
Awesome. Thanks, Whitney. Had to pop over to another office just to make sure that we are dealing with some of these internet connectivity issues today. So very much appreciate y'all being patient with us. So this particular resource also falls in line with that Department of Ag development mind map. This is an example of some different structures of organization charts that are available just as an example for your tribal leaders and your tribal subject matter experts and employees as they're looking at, you know, how we need to structure a Department of Agriculture. And there's a variety of different ways that that can be done. And we have 4 examples here, 3 of which are based on real tribes that have systems set up. And we tried to include examples of all programs that could particularly touch on agriculture, whether that's from food and nutrition, conservation, land management, wildlife, some labor considerations, and then also some of the BIA functions that could be potentially compacted or contracted by your tribe. So this is a really good opportunity to see what programs you currently have and what programs that you would like to have, and finding a way to make those fit with each other. There are ways that you can address your structure for growth. There's also opportunities to create a structure and then build off of that. So that's a really good way to kind of think about how you want to move forward. This is one of my favorite resources that we've created. It is called the Resource Bank for Informed Goal Setting. And we have a couple of iterations of this particular resource bank. One is intended for tribes and tribal organizations to get a bank of their resources put together to make determinations about how to move forward and progress either with developing a tribal Department of Agriculture or expanding ag and natural resource programs. We also have a resource bank for informed goal setting that's targeting individual or entrepreneurial producers or operators in Indian country. And the worksheet for individual producers is mirrored off of the worksheet for tribes and tribal organizations. However, there's some particular nuance in this particular resource bank when it comes to identifying those resources like land, buildings, facilities, equipment, what expertise is available to you in your community, or even beyond that, considering the wide reach of the internet, if broadband is something that that individual producer has access to. What other supports are available, what water access or considerations need to be taken into account, including treaty rights as far as that water is concerned, personnel and labor, and enterprises and organizations that exist to support that particular activity. We also include sections to find out more information about what existing tribal guidance is available and materials associated with that. And then the ever important funding source. Access to capital and credit is incredibly important for Indian country ag producers. And we want to make sure that all of our producers and tribal operators are definitely considering what options are available to them and how to access them. So by creating this resource bank, it was intended to be a place where an individual producer can really compile all of the information necessary to start making informed decisions based on not just the current existing capabilities of their operation, but for future planning and additional outreach to really be as robust and comprehensive as that producer or enterprise wants to have happen, and how to leverage those resources and make them work for each individual enterprise. So what's next? We really want your feedback on this material. We want to know what's working for you and what isn't. Are there things that we can do better? Are there things that were particularly helpful for you and really helped you innovate or helped you get a better understanding of the lay of the land and what opportunities were available to you, either as a beginning farmer or rancher, native youth, a tribal employee, a subject matter expert, or even tribal leadership? What's informative? What's made an impact? What other information do we need to include, and do we need to do a little more research on and provide? And we'd also like to hear about any other topics that you'd like for us to address with this particular scope of resources that we're creating. We're always learning and innovating, and definitely want to make sure that we're meeting the wants and needs of the populations that we serve, which pretty much covers the entirety of Indian country. So give us your ideas, give us your feedback. We definitely want to hear that from you.
So I think we can actually open it up for questions now at this point. Just as a reminder that you can submit your questions using the questions dialog box in the control panel. So we'll look at those and read those aloud here and try to get those answered for you. One common question I just wanted to remind folks of is that if you have registered for the webinar, we will provide a link to the webinar recording as well as a PowerPoint presentation, so you can reference that at your own time. So we've had a lot of questions about potential of looking into nonprofits and local nonprofits. What are your thoughts on that, Carly?
Sure. So we have a couple of different ways that we interface with nonprofits, or that tribal ag operations can interface with nonprofits. We're definitely always interested in exploring how we can leverage nonprofit resources, or how native-led nonprofits can be influential in tribal ag spaces. So we'd love to hear your ideas, and our emails are posted on the PowerPoint slide in front of you. So please send us your thoughts as far as, you know, what kind of resources that you'd be interested in seeing or seeking from or as a nonprofit. So our next question is, how many tribes have adopted the tailored tribal ag code from our model code that we've created? We've actually had quite a few tribes interface with the code and make different considerations as far as what their code needs to look like. I'm actively working with one tribe right now, and we've had other tribes also select different chapters of the code to incorporate into their particular individualized codes. And there are customization opportunities available to reflect each tribe's cultural connection and particular priorities. Some of the more popular ones include our cottage food code, which allows for tribes to step into a regulatory role to encourage entrepreneurial food production, kind of going from your home kitchen business and expanding from there, which allows that transition and oversight to have support, because sometimes we want to make sure we're not promoting regulatory encroachment by non-native jurisdictions. So that one has been a particular interest and success. We have other tribes who are considering our meat processing code components, as well as community gardens, beekeeping, and a lot of other different components. We're actually working on getting some updates to the code to reflect some new developments in association with some of the particular components, especially considering food safety protocols and regulatory updates from the federal government that tribes would be required to comply with.
So if people have questions about regional specific information, is it best for them just to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely reach out to us. My email is hotbed@uark.edu. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And if there are particular, region concerns, we're happy to, try and provide as much information as we can. I will say one of the great resources that is in the process of being developed, and it should be available on our website, is our BIA regional map. That also gives you some additional contact information about what region you're at and what contacts are available through the BIA and other Indigenous federal programs or Indigenous reaching federal programs that could be of particular interest to you. I know a lot of times making sure that we have updated contact information, especially with regard to subject matter that is particularly relevant to Indian country, kind of requires some specialized knowledge at the federal level. So we want to make sure that we're sharing what we have. So that's one of the ways that we're addressing some of the regional concerns. But if there are other more specific questions, definitely reach out to us and we'd love to help you with that. So, we had a question, do we work with any tribes in Canada or is it only for the US? We have an intent to expand our reach, and right now we are primarily focused on United States federally recognized and state recognized tribes, but we do know that there are tribes that straddle the border and are interested in developing some trade zones. We're interested in supporting that as well, in addition to expanding outreach to support First Nations communities and other Indigenous groups, both in Canada and the US and possibly elsewhere. But that is something that is on our horizon. We're not currently doing it, but we would very much like to. So if you are working with a tribe or are a First Nations member in Canada, please reach out to us. So we had a question, should newly developed tribal regulations or policies mirror the federal regulations and policies? I'm going to give you the lawyer answer here. It depends. There are certain federal statutes that are of what's called general applicability. That means it applies to states, territories, and tribes across the board. And we see that a lot in safety considerations, food safety in particular. So in that instance, yes, tribal regulations or policies ideally could mirror the federal regulations and policies, but also would have the opportunity to be more stringent if that tribe so chose. There are other considerations that a tribe's statutes and regulations and policies may need to align more closely to, what their treaty rights are reflected as, which may not be consistent with a federal regulation or policy, especially if it's not one of general applicability. So depending upon what the subject matter or context of that tribal regulation or policy is really going to be dependent upon whether there needs to be any sort of incorporation of some of those federal regulations.
Another question we got is there a resource tribal nations can go to seek evaluation on the efficacy and usefulness of their initiatives?
Sure. There's a really great resource available right now that we always encourage tribes to check out, and it kind of helps you get started. First Nations Development Institute has a food sovereignty assessment that tribes and tribal organizations can go through the process of developing that report to get a good idea of what kind of successes and challenges that they are having within their own particular communities, and help develop solutions to address some of those, and help develop a game plan to meet some of the tribal priorities there. So that's a really great question. That's a good way to get a snapshot. And we are also available to assist in that planning process. You know, once that food sovereignty, or once that sovereignty assessment is completed, we definitely want to make sure that you're able to build from there and use that information and execute to the best of each tribe's particular wants and needs.
And just as a quick reminder that yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be sharing this webinar link as well as a PowerPoint presentation, and even also a link to the Eats Academy webpage, even though it is accessible from our homepage on our website at indigenousfoodandag.com. But just as a reminder, I wanted to let everyone know that we will be following up via email with all registrants. Another question we have is, do we have any resources with tribes that are working with greenhouse operations?
Yeah, so greenhouses or hoop houses or high tunnels are a particular interest. And I know those all just a little bit different from each other when we're talking about greenhouses, but tribes that are working with greenhouse operations, we have a lot of extension resources that have been created through some of the land-grant universities and some of our tribal colleges and universities that are 1994 institutions also have some materials created. We can definitely help you do some research to find what resource is going to be a particular implication to you. With those greenhouse operations, it would also be a good idea to get some information about food safety and grower training. And that's something that we directly provide here at IFAI. And we've been doing those remotely considering some of the pandemic restrictions, and we'll continue to do that and make those available to you. So if you have staff or a team that you think could benefit from grower training with regard to food safety and the handling considerations associated with greenhouse production, we'd definitely be interested in supporting those endeavors for you. About how to seek recourse if there has been conflict with USDA employees at the local level. There is a process in place, and I would recommend that you check out the Office for Civil Rights at the USDA. And there's on the website, there should be a process that you can access in order to file a complaint or seek resource. So that's something that I would encourage you to check out. And they have really great staffing over there and people that are committed to addressing some of the challenges associated with disparities in ag policy. What's the word I'm looking for? Disparate treatment by of minority groups when it comes to federal programs. So definitely check that out. USDA website, Office of Civil Rights.
This is Erin, and I just want to add to a couple of years ago, we also did a webinar walkthrough on, it wouldn't necessarily be, I think, exactly what you're addressing, but it would be like taking advantage of like the USDA settlement system. There's like a specific administrative law system that people go through sometimes for complaints, and we did a little bit of a webinar walkthrough. I think you can still see that video on our YouTube channel. It is from a couple of years ago. So we haven't gone back through to update any kind of current changes in the law, but there is a good overview there that you can check out as well. But like Carly's spot on with the USDA website.
Another question we had is, are there any training or programs we offer online, or is it in person only?
So we do offer the grower training, like I had mentioned before, online. It's not something that is just independently posted that you can access individually. It's something that's scheduled with an organization, and we provide, the direct guidance with that. So we're currently not in person as we're still working remotely. We do anticipate transitioning back to in-person offerings But if you're interested in getting something like that scheduled, please reach out to us, and I will also defer to Aaron to discuss any other online training opportunities that we have.
I agree with Carly completely. We are really excited that we're launching our own food safety curriculum and training. And actually, Josiah on our team is the best person to reach out to for scheduling training, I think, right now, if you're interested in that food safety training particularly. But for now, we'll be online, but we are hoping to get back out there in the field sooner rather than later.
We had a question about how to get Native representation on councils and different representative bodies. So there are a few different ways that can occur. And unfortunately, there's not any, one standardized answer for that. It really depends on, what the particular advisory or regulatory body is that we're seeking Indigenous representation on. Whether it's in regard to farming, conservation, water resources. The best thing that I can do that I would recommend is to request the bylaws or policy of that particular group to see if there are any targeted recruiting opportunities. Additionally, if that particular body is directing or implementing a federal program that's administered by that group or by the state, there should be some opportunities that seek to incorporate Indigenous representation. I do know that the NRCS and other federal agency programs under USDA do solicit Native applications, and we do try and circulate those as they come out when they become available. So sign up for our email blast and our EATS webinar or our EATS newsletter, and we will definitely circulate that information when it becomes available. We had a question about whether we had any land lease agreements to sample. We don't currently, but that's a great idea. I have worked on some of those before in a previous job that I had before joining the University of Arkansas. So we can add that to our list of sample lease agreements. Those are always important, especially when we're considering the different types of land holdings that we see in Indian country, whether that's fee property, whether it's restricted property, or whether it's individual trust property, or even tribal trust property, and considering some of the enterprise applications that a tribe might have. So great question. We will definitely add that to our list.
Okay. If anyone else has a question they'd like to submit, you can submit that now. I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But if you do submit a question now and we're not able to answer, we will follow up with you via email following this webinar. So it isn't your last chance to obviously get in touch with us. But Carly, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to share these resources with you. Going to continue to build and make sure that we're meeting the needs and demands of Indian country. Got some great feedback with your questions today, so thank you so much for collaborating. We'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email. Please give us a call and let us know how we can support your activities with regard to food sovereignty, ag production, natural resources conservation, and any other touch on our native food and ag systems.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and we appreciate everyone joining us today.